Joining us in studio is also Dr. Benedetta Berti of the NSS. I want to start with you for a second, and Amir Onem Haaretz, a senior military analyst, and of course Tal Shalev. If you've heard him alongside with me, Colonel Peter Lerner, responding to the danger that Syria might pose. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It's no secret that Syria is in the midst of a civil war. We're theorizing here. I mean, who fired yesterday? Do we even know? Can we even know at Israel?
Right. Well, I think we can take a pretty educated guess if we look at what has been happening since the January 18th Israeli operation against Hezbollah mid to senior leadership, including Iranians that were with them in the convoy. If you see it through that lens, then this attack would be likely come from Hezbollah ranks and would be likely part of a retaliation campaign. I don't think this would be the only retaliation act. Let's say it would be one of them. Right. So I think we can take a pretty educated guess that it comes from the Hezbollah side, and that with the consent, tacit support of the Syrian army. I think that's an educated guess. At the same time, I would agree with you. If you look at what's going on in the south of Syria and in the Syrian Golan, yes, it's definitely not controlled at this point in time by
Bashar Assad.
Absolutely not. Yeah. If you look at who's facing Israel, then you have rebel groups, and specifically you have actually Jabhat al-Nusra. However, I would stress, I don't think this attack comes from them. From their perspective, there is a lot of interest in keeping quiet with Israel and focusing on their fight internally.
Internally. Dr. Berti, I want to ask you, this is something that has been sitting on my mind this morning, is that over the course of the last 3 years, with the Syria civil war, we have seen these shots, and that's for both of you, fired from across the border, right?
Yeah,
we have. I mean, this happens.
Not every day.
Yeah.
Crossfire. There's been a couple of skirmishes. Last year, there was a brief tit for tat between Israel and Hezbollah that also occurred to the Syrian Golan, because Hezbollah did not want to do it through Lebanon, because that would be a signal of escalation. Again, agreeing with what has been said before.
But to bring it all back home, and Dr. Berti, I'm asking you again, when it comes to Hezbollah right now up north, and if as Amir Owen said, if the idea is that potentially there's a risk there, potentially, it's dangerous, does Hezbollah even have the capital to open a front up north against Israel as it's fighting for Bashar Assad in many ways, as it's entangled completely in this very, very messy war in Syria?
Well, I would argue that's the problem with the perception, meaning the reality is, yes, Hezbollah has been very busy supporting the Bashar al-Assad regime. On top of that, Hezbollah has been also very busy fighting its own war against jihadist groups in Lebanon, which is also something the organization is very much invested in. So yeah, they're basically already fighting in two fronts. Therefore, they don't have really an interest at this point in going into an all-out war with Israel. At the same time, if Israel continues to act on this perception, the perception that no matter what he does, Hezbollah is not in a position to retaliate, then there's huge potential for miscalculations, because eventually Hezbollah will be in a position in which public opinion, internal pressure would force it to retaliate in a way that could in turn trigger another response from Israel. In other words, yes, Hezbollah doesn't want a war. Yes, Israel doesn't want a war. But if they keep going at it, eventually it could actually lead to a war.
It could act. As we're, Dr. Benedetta Berti of the NSS, as we're theorizing this morning and potentially hazardous and horrible things in the region, the Kobani front closes, but how does it take? I mean, this thing I think that boggles our mind when it comes to ISIS, it took 4 or 5 months in that city, with the assistance of coalition airstrikes, to get this group out of Kobani. Is this really such a coup?
Well, let's start with saying they made it. I don't think Kobani per se is the most strategic point ever, but they made it one, which it's interesting. ISIS, they decided to make Kobani strategic for them, meaning that in the past 134 days or however it took for them to be kicked out of Kobani, they made this one of the jewels in the crowns of their campaign, so to speak. They invested a lot in talking about it on their social media. They sent a lot of people.
They sent a hostage, John Cantillium, and actually a British journalist to show how Kobani is in the hands of ISIS.
So this was kind of a way they were showing their prowess, showing their power, doing power projection. So being kicked out of there, it's something that does somewhat affect their morale and credibility. At the same time, yes, you're right, it took a long time, over 130 days. It took serious investment from the Kurdish fighters, and the majority of the strikes that have been conducted so far in Syria, the vast majority, around 70% of them, have been actually focused on Kobani helping the Kurds to kick out ISIS. So what can we learn from this? Then yes, ISIS momentum has been broken, but they're by no means defeated. They still control a large portion of territory. They have the weapons. They still have the fighters.
They still have a third of Iraq in their hands.
And a third of Syria.
And a third of Syria.
I think we're in it for the long haul on this one.
For the long haul, yes.
Far-flung and God-forsaken places like Iwo Jima in World War II or Khe Sanh in the Vietnam War take a meaning far beyond their real significance because they were made by the media and by the parties to the conflicts themselves. They were made a test of wills. Now, in Kobani, it was important because it was a destination, a target that ISIS wanted, because the coalition, along with Turkish help, did not want
and because
ISIS
we in the media could cover it from the Turkish side of the border that was fairly safe in many ways. I mean, that's part of it.
The important thing here is that the trend has been reversed, that the irreversible, so to speak, irreversible march of ISIS towards new glory, new conquests have been blocked. Now, during this time, it's true that more than 100 days have passed, but during this time, the Americans have been training more and more Iraqi brigades and more local militias along with the Kurds. The Turks have been helping logistically by keeping a supply line open.
Right. And
there have been moves against the financial infrastructure that ISIS has. So one has to look at it longer.
In the longer, as Dr. Berti said, this is everybody's in it for the long haul. But I mean, really quickly in the time that we have, I'm wondering out loud as we're seeing, Israel trying, pointing fingers, Hezbollah, whatnot. This new player in the region, and Tripoli's attack yesterday that was being claimed responsibility for by an ISIS-related group, which is seeming to be some sort of a franchise that everybody's taking the credit for if you do some sort of an attack. Is this not the big new foe? And it's interesting to me that I have not seen much rhetoric of ISIS yet against Israel. But isn't that, to a certain degree...
All in good time.
All in good time. Just give them time, exactly.
I mean, it's in their name. The entire name, the Islamic... Now they call themselves the Islamic State, but the name is the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, which is the Levant, which includes Israel.
But this is unclear to both of us. Aren't we underestimating this foe if it takes 4 months to beat them in a small town like Kobani?
You just mentioned regarding Libya and what transpired there, and Libya has disintegrated into 3 parts anyway. But you just mentioned the 1998 attacks on the embassies.
That supposedly the attack in Libya yesterday was, to avenge.
So we are in a cycle. At that time, President Clinton only responded by missiles against Al-Qaeda.
True.
It didn't help. They attacked on 9/11. We are also in it for the long haul.
Sadly, so it seems. And ISIS won, the million-dollar question, Dr. Berti, again, I'm asking you to theorize on this potentially hazardous morning. But, can they be beaten without foreign troops on the ground?
Well, I would say the short answer is I don't think so. The longer answer is there is an investment of boosting local troops in Iraq from the Iraqi army side, which is a very difficult investment.
And that could take years. Yeah.
And in Syria, I don't think it makes sense to, disjoin the two fronts. It's very important to have someone confronting ISIS in Syria, and there is the program to train the opposition. However, I have a lot of words about that program. It's going too slowly. They're not getting enough funding. But the vision is there. The execution, in my opinion, is not going as planned. But overall, I think if you want to beat ISIS, you have to address the bigger issue, which is the vacuum of power, the civil war, and the lack of governance.
Yes, and on that happy note, I'm going to thank you both for being with me in studio.